You got the flow right. First is uh, how a standard controller or standard booting mechanism happens in our. I'll give a basic idea. First is PMU chip is nowadays recent days it is PMU chip is one of the important chip which is used in most of the ARM boards where a reset sequence is executed. Reset sequence means I will show you what is a reset sequence. Reset sequence.
That this one. No, in first beginning.
Which one?
That RC.
What is a reset sequence means? It's like a sequence of timing and power variation. That means you are giving some voltage at some timing, some voltage at some timing. This is very critical required for the processor to come up. When you give this reset, that's why very complex reset sequence signaling mechanism is there where chip will come out and it will be resetted. Once reset is done, processor will get into boot ROM. This boot ROM will verify all your boot configuration. See, these recent processors in our DI processors, 6-pin multiple pin configurations are there where first boot device can be depending upon pin selection. Out of 6-pin selection, we can say first boot device is NAND, second boot device is MMC, third boot device is SPI, data flash, third boot is NOR flash, like that. We can vary and like that configuration pins are there. Now you can change this. You can set these pins using a 0 error 1. You can put a 1 switch. We can put dip switches or we can put hardwired that zeros and ones. We can make it like you can ground the pin. You can pull up the pin, pull down the pin, and we can do this pin configuration. And we can say our first boot device is MMC, second boot device is NAND. If MMC is not able to search for NAND, like that we can do. That configuration one is you have done it. Then based on that configuration, boot ROM will try to detect if MMC is the first boot device. It will try. Consider MMC became the first boot device. Then what happens to search load bootloader from the MMC? What it will do is that the MMC should be formatted such a way that it should be a first partition should be a FAT, and your first sector should be a bootable sector with the DOS bootable flag set in that actually. That way, immediately what
That is
your
the way it is designed, sir.
that is a design. It is required actually. Without that, I think it will not boot. Okay. Now MMC card, it will check that whether this is set that way, and immediately it will search. It will try to boot from that, and it will go and search the MLO. In a TI, MLO is a first bootloader. See, in most of the recent ARM processor, 2-level bootloaders are there. First level bootloader is it will do DDR initializations, DDR settings, timing, and power management related settings, PLL settings, everything it will do. And once it is clock settings, everything is done, IO clock and system clock, it is ready to go for the second level bootloader like U-boot. Then once U-boot will load the kernel will load the file system. This is the 4-level step is going on. Now what is going to happen? Boot ROM will go and search the MLO in the your board, in the MMC card, first partition and the FAT partition. If MLO is available, immediately it will load the MLO. MLO will initialize all the clock settings and other things. Then RAM is ready for you to access. Then what is going to happen is that it will use to load the SRAM also at that time. Then your SRAM, there is an internal SRAM in the board, no? It will use that for running. Now next your RAM is ready to access. Once RAM is ready to access, Now it will go ahead and it will load the U-boot to the memory. And U-boot will run. U-boot has a one capability. It has a parsing capability, scripting capability also. And U-boot has other better capability of setting up multiple variables, environment variables, and it has a capability to detect multiple devices like NAND, SPI flash, MMC, network boot, network devices, everything. It has lot of support for different drivers like SPI flash chip from different vendors and master host controller. And usually whenever the TI releases the kernel, it will do support for its board. It's a evaluation board. It will do the support, and in that evaluation board support, it will add the support for host controller like MMC host controller. It will support for the USB. Mostly USB host controller nowadays not supported, but MMC host controller it supported. SPI controller is supported. It supported I2C controller. It supports all other controllers such a way that we can do a basic SPI flash. If it is plugged to SPI controller, we can automatically for SPI flash can be anything like Atmel data flash, or it can be a Freescale flash, or it can be a SSD, a silicon storage flash, or it can be a Micron flash. It can be any SPI flash chip. U-boot has a lot of drivers for different chips already because it has been grown in last several years. And U-boot has drivers for see only the work of the TI is to when they release a new processor, they have to add a support for their SoC chips. Got it, no? That means internal SoC has core processor support. That means core processor support they should add, and they should add the support for the SoC, whichever the controllers in the chip, like MMC controller, LCD controller, SPI controller, I2C controller. These things I explained that day. That is you are understood properly, no? Because I explained about block diagram, right? Previously it was there on the PCB. Now went inside the chip. Mine core processor plus additional chip controllers. All went inside the chip now, right? All these things TI is silicon, no? Because it's a single chip. They should add those support themselves. But client devices which are connected to that is maybe already drivers are available in U-boot. Because there are already so many companies are added the support for those client devices. Let's say SPI data flash support will be there. Now Ethernet PI. Like Realtek LAN 8071. These PI chips are there, no? Or USB PI chips. This maybe support is already available in the U-boot because so many companies are there. PI means the PI layer is there. No? See what happens most of the time, all chips are now isolated in ASIC as PI chips and MAC chips. MAC is media access control. Right, another is PI layer, physical layer. Physical layer control chips are different. MAC layer chips are different. MAC layer chips are implements the protocol. That means in a USB protocol, bus protocol is there, no? That is implemented by the MAC layer chip. Or a Ethernet bus protocol, MIA is there, no? Media India Independent Interface. That is implemented by the MAC layer and all the MAC layer protocols, like so many MAC layer protocols. Your old, you should know about Ethernet, no? 802.3. IEEE 802.3 and MAC layer protocols are 802.3 and all complete. All those implementation, half of the LLC, right? It is almost, and MI. See what happens. MAC layer will talk to this one PI chip through MI interface, right? Right. That means it will upper layer. It will give the LLC, right? LLC interface. Half the thing is LLC will be done in the driver. Half the thing is done in the chip. That way, most of the protocol, MAC layer protocol, no, IEEE, is implemented in the chip only, Ethernet MAC chip, right? And remaining thing is done in the PI chip. PI chip will do all the physical layer transmission, right? That way, that's why all this chip support is available in the U-boot, right? Because already there will be 1,000 other companies are saying, like for example, Freescale would have been added support in U-boot. Or maybe some other companies would have been added. Atmel would have been done. Cirrus Logic would have been done. My ARM itself would have been done. So many companies would have been done support for their chips. Now, client devices most of the time U-boot has a lot of support. But for their chip, for TAS, their processor, for that they should add a support themselves. That they will do it. LCD controller, MMC controller, SPI controller, I2C controller, they will do it. Controller support they will add, but client device support will be added. Now consider U-boot has all these. U-boot supports a list of commands, like commands like NAND, RW, MMC init, MMC rescan, MMC the list, MMCs and MMC dev and something. All these commands it will support, and it has lot of commands like thousand other commands like SF init, SF read, SF write. So many commands are there for SPI Palace. MMC command, NAND commands are there. Network it has TFTP boot commands to boot from the download the from the TFTP server. It will download the kernel through TFTP boot command. But ping is there for pinging to the some IP. So many, and it will support some variables like IP80 variable. It will support to set the IP address of the device in U-boot. Server IP variable it will support to set the server IP for the TFTP server. Net mask variable it will support. Gateway variable it will support for setting the gateway, setting the net mask. These are the variable it will support actually, variables. Using a command called set env, we can set the variables. Print env, we can see the variables which are there in the this thing. Set env and print env. These two commands are there. And I told you these variables and commands, NAND RW, NAND. Nowadays multiple U-boot versions will give multiple commands. Lot of confusion is there. NAND RW is there, NAND is there. Then another thing is that actually SF is there for SPI Flash, and another command is there. TFTP boot is there. Another command is there for fat load is a command which is used for the MMC. Fat load is it will read the fat partition and it will say fat load. Let's say you have to give the which device, that is MMC, and then it will give the MMC which MMC. If two MMC cards are there, MMC 0 or MMC 1, fat load space MMC plus 0, 0 means first device, 1 means second device, then partition name, colon partition name, 0 colon 1, 2, like that. You can load from first partition, second partition, third partition. Then the RAM address, you have to give the RAM address, where you want to copy the then the image name, kernel image, U image, U capital I MAG. If you give that, it will copy the U image from the first partition of the MMC to the RAM address. This RAM address, when you compile your kernel, it will generate one address. That address you have to note down and save in the one variable. Now what is going to happen? This RAM address, the kernel is copied. Then you should use a variable called bootargs. What is the variable? This is a variable which is U-boot will always use to send the kernel argument using ATAG memory. ATAG's memory to the kernel. Which one? Bootargs. Bootargs, using a bootargs variable, it will pass a kernel argument. Kernel requires argument. Na? See this one. Huh? This is the kernel argument, no? This one's argument is there. This argument will be passed by the bootloader U-boot to the kernel through a variable called bootargs. BOOTARGS. This is standard way U-boot passes through the kernel. Right? That variable you should set before booting from the kernel letters. That way kernel will get all these arguments. And why it is arguments are required for the kernel? Because kernel should know which partition file system is there now. That is passed through a variable called root is equal to. Right? And kernel should dump the messages on which console? Serial console. No? That also we should say console is equal to. And kernel should know what whether load the file system means read-write mode or read-only mode. Kernel should know how to boot the system, whether it wants to it has to use which video chip, all those things, all those information we should pass to the kernel arguments. To pass this kernel arguments, there is a variable called bootargs, BOOTARGS. This argument, depending upon type of the boot device, we can set up. This was U-boot will give you a scripting capability. With the scripting capability of the U-boot, we can set up the bootargs variable. Once you set up the bootargs variable, then we should execute a command called bootem with the kernel address where you copied your kernel. Bootem with the kernel address. For example, if you copied the kernel to 0x80000000, then bootem 0x80000000. If you give that, it will boot the kernel. What kernel does is that immediately it will uncompress the kernel. See, whatever the kernel you are loading is a compressed kernel, no? That compressed kernel will bootem will make you to jump into that address. It will uncompress that address. Kernel will uncompress itself, and it will, once it uncompresses, kernel will boot. While booting, first what it does is that it will boot with the physical memory. Then what it does is that it will do the processor initialization. In the time of processor initialization, what it will do is that it will check the ARC registers where whether U-boot is set up some board related number in the U-boot. There is a common communication number is set up in the ARC register by the U-boot for this particular board to detect whether you are booting from this board only, custom board only. That board number we can put it actually. And in the kernel we can check that whether we are booting from that board only. That way, if that board only, it will continue to boot. If it is detected that board number is set up in the register, then kernel will boot. Once kernel is done all the ARM related initialization using your entry.s and head.s, it will do all the initialization. Then kernel will do even early print case using the early serial init. You got it, no? At the time of initial, it will do early serial init using some kind of initial physical addressing mechanism. It will do it. Then kernel will do the MMU initialization. Once MMU initialization it will do, kernel will set up the page table entries. For the kernel, see, kernel is splitting the total virtual address memory into 1 GB and 3 GB, right? In the virtual address space, what it will do is that it will set up, see, for the kernel requires a very straightforward, it doesn't want page fault exception to be happening for the kernel address space. It wants only for the 3 GB user address space, it wants a page fault to be happening. That's the reason you remember kernel also you can't do a floating point. Right? You can't do a floating point in the inside the kernel. Why? Because usually when you use float and double R, the kernel compiler will generate a floating point exception. See, in AM335X there is a Neon coprocessor is there and it will do the floating point handling. Most of these floating point is done. But olden days in ARM floating point was not that, they were using Netwinder floating point emulations. Exception handler was there actually. And what happens in ARM, in x86 already you know, initial days only 887 was there, which is a FEU, floating point unit. Right? And see, kernel doesn't want floating point page fault exception to be handling generated for the page. See, when PTE entry is not there, MMU will generate a floating point exception, right? Sorry. MMU will generate a page fault exception, right? This page fault exception, kernel for kernel address, it doesn't want. To avoid this, we need to go with the. We need to implement such a way that we all set up the PTE for virtual address, such a way that it directly accesses the virtual physical mapping is set up for PMD, PGD. Setup is for PMD and PGD and PTE. Entries are set up. Now, once it is set up, it will continue. It will come to our board in it. Our board in it will be in ARM, MAC hyphen whatever the processor architecture and board architecture. There will be a definition in our kernel config in ARM MAC hyphen board and processor architecture. That will vary from processor. For example, in case of AM35 is MAC hyphen OMAP 2. MAC hyphen OMAP 2. Right? Then once it comes here, it will execute the board hyphen star.c files. It will go through all the function. There is a machine init function is there. Function pointer table is there. Machine init. In the machine init, whatever the function you assigned, it will execute the function. That init machine function it will execute, and it will, in the init machine we will register our devices like SPI device. It will set up the pin configurations also for different pins, and we will set up the different SPI devices, its speed, LCD means LCD monitors, resolutions, everything will set up for the board, and we will register all the platform devices, LCD device, we will register SPI device. If it's a chip, we will register. If it's a power management chip, we will register power management chip. If it is a EEPROM chip, we will register EEPROM chip. If it is a data flash, we will register data flash. We will register NAND chip. We will register SPI ROM chip. We will register all the chips here, and we will initialize Wi-Fi chip, Bluetooth chip. Everything is done in the boarding. We will initialize and register. We will set up the base address. Why base address setup? See, most of the time U-boot also requires all the base address setup, as well as kernel also requires. Why kernel requires again base address setup? Because now kernel is in virtual address space. No? That's why we have to do. For accessing anything, we have to use a API called IO remap. Now kernel, we should do a base address setup, and base address setup all the things. And once you set up the base address using IO remap, you will get a virtual address. Virtual address space plus your offset, you will access the register. You can use API like readL, writeL, readW, writeW, readB, writeB. These APIs you can use, and you can do a register writes and reads into the memory mapped area of the device of all SPI controller, I2C controller, LCD controller, MMC controller you can access. Okay. Now what happens once the platform initialization is done? Subsystem initialization will be done by the Linux. Then it will continue. It will load individual drivers, and all drivers whichever said you Y. When you do kernel configuration, you would have done Y or M. M means module. Y means it is integrated. All YY drivers will be loaded one by one, and Y drivers will check, executes its probe function, and it will check any devices are registered with the same name or with the same vendor ID or device ID which is mentioned by the board unit. If it is same name or vendor ID, device ID is registered, then those driver will be initialized, and it will be creates a device. It will create all the basic requirement for the driver. It will initialize the driver. Now, once parallelly, in the meantime, kernel what it does is that it will check for the file system, root file system device which is mentioned in the kernel arguments, and it will first initialize the file system device, that is a MMC or maybe NAND or maybe it may be hard disk, anything it will initialize, and it will show on the screen also. Then it will try to detect the partition also. Once it detects the partition, it will try to check the partition super block. It will try to check automatically whether it can detect the super block and detect the file system. If it is not able to detect, it wants a specific kernel argument from you, like root fs type is equal to whatever, like JFFS2, ext3. You should specify. Sometimes if you don't specify, kernel will crash. Cannot find the file system, it will say and crash. But if you specify, it will work. But if it is able to detect the super block, it will mount the file system. Right? And sometimes you should even add some kernel argument like root delay or boot delay, root delay, and some root wait commands you should add such a way that sometimes, for example, when you are doing NFS, network is slow. That time kernel may panic because it couldn't detect in the long time, it couldn't mount the file system. To avoid this, you should add a root wait or root delay command line arguments to make sure kernel will wait till the file system it is able to mount. It is able to detect and mount. For example, some of the MMC cards are slow, then we should add this kind of thing. This also workaround we have to. Some of the USB pen drives are very slow. That time we should add these commands. Right? Now consider it is mounted. The first thing what kernel does is that it will search a SBIN init. See, in Android, some Android it is searches for /init. For that, you should say init is equal to your /init, you should specify. Because in Android, no, /SBIN init is not there. It is in /init. In a normal Linux, it will be there in /SBIN /init. That's why kernel will automatically search for /SBIN /init, which is the first process of Linux. Right? Now, what is going to happen is that this init will internally check for init tab. In init tab, it will look for sysinit. Sysinit, what is the script mentioned in the front? It will execute. For example, /etc init d RCS. It will run. That RCS will parallelly, it will init process will check for init default. If the run level is mentioned as 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, Linux init will support 6 run levels. Out of that, 0 and 0 is mapped for the reboot scripts. Sorry, 0 is mapped for the shutdown scripts. 6 is mapped for the reboot scripts. And 1 is mapped for the single user. 2, 3, 4, 5 is left to the distribution choice. In Ubuntu and Debian, it will 2 is most of the time is used. Consider when it is mentioned 2, what it does is that it will go for a folder called etc rc2.d, and in that capital S with the number, whichever the number like 01, 02, it will priority wise it will start one by one scripts. In that scripts, all we should design such a way that we should start individual daemons. Like daemon, first you should start udev daemon, which is maybe you should start some syslog daemon, bootlog daemon. Then because the OSLR logging is very important for us, then we will start the say udevd. Udevd is very important to load, create the device nodes, because device files are important. Na? Udevd will load, and then once udevd started, then we will load. We may run something like networking daemon. Networking we print a daemon. We may load some other important daemons which is required for us. And finally our graphics daemon we can start. Once graphics loaded, it will come to the graphics prompt where the graphics display manager will appear and it will come to the graphics prompt. That's how overall process is there. Once that, you will log in and you will get access to everything. And once you log in, that also there. When you log in, there will be a file called etc password and group in Linux. The etc password, there will be a end section, there will be which shell to execute, bin bash. Then for in etc there is something called profile.d is there. In the profile.d and etc profile file is there. When you log into any shell, the etc profile is executed. That profile will set up the path for you, environment path like $path, $LD library path, maybe host name, maybe display. There is a lot of environment variable which is required. That will be set up by profile and profile.t scripts. This will make the overall boot of Linux. Okay. You play it.
Profile file is different for different